In a world gone mad, only rationality and common sense can save it. It's Andrew and Jerry Save the World with your hosts, Andrew Langer and Jerry Rogers. And now, here's Andrew and Jerry.
Well, hey there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Andrew and Jerry Save the World. Episode 19, Andrew and Jerry Tackle Abortion Politics. I'm Andrew Langer.
Jerry Rogers.
And it's been a crazy week. And it hasn't been a crazy week just because of what's going on with the Supreme Court. And that's really where we're going to squarely focus today. It's also been a crazy week, and I'm going to take a moment of personal privilege, Jerry. I am, and I may cough during this episode. I am getting over COVID. This is the first time I've actually said anything about it publicly, but I discovered on Sunday morning, I woke up thinking that I had a really nasty case of strep throat, went in and got what I thought was going to be tested for strep, but when I presented with my symptoms, they tested me for COVID, and hey, I got COVID. I am feeling, I'm actually feeling, Jerry, now, I would say about 95%. I mean, probably maybe even 98%. I'm almost there, but it was touch and go. Not actually, I shouldn't say that. The first couple of days were rough, but it was like rough, Jerry, in having a really bad cold, almost like a flu. So anyway, so that's that. Jerry was very concerned. But yeah, when we know where it came from, I'm not going to get into those details. Suffice it to say, I was not at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, Jerry. I did not get it there. I got it at an event that was a much better event and with much better performances by the participants. I will say that much. You have not. You think you've had COVID?
You know, at this point, and a lot of the data, a lot of the reporting, the scientific medical reporting on COVID is that, that most of us have had it. Many of us have had it and didn't realize it. And again, that puts in perspective the government's overreaction, over governing, over interfering, over regulating the economy and people's lives during the COVID crisis. Again, that's not to say that early on when we did not know, again, you take measures and in retrospect, perhaps they were too harsh or too deep, but you should learn from that and then quickly adjust. Our public health system never adjusted. In fact, it hasn't adjusted. I mean, again, this is going to be off topic from abortion and these issues we're going to be talking about. But the fact of the matter is that the Biden administration is appealing the mask mandate.
Yes.
And because it's appealing the mask mandate, remember the mask mandate was rejected by a federal court. They're appealing that decision. However, by appealing that decision, it puts the issue of mask mandates, mask wearing, squarely in the political camp, takes it out of the medical camp. And what I mean by that is very simple. And that is, if the CDC decided today, tomorrow, that cloth masks are useless, do not wear them, in fact, it causes more harm than good, it doesn't make a difference. It can't make that order, because if it does, the Biden administration's appeal goes away.
Sure, yeah.
So the mask mandate must stay in place, not for science, but because of politics. And that's been the problem all along.
I want to turn to, speaking about politics, because I want to pull this up, because this came up yesterday. Somebody tweeted out about this. We talk about picking and choosing in the public discourse, what's fact and what's misinformation. And we're probably going to get into this with Carrie Severino, who's going to be our guest today, about this minister of disinformation. I pulled up, for those folks who are watching, if you're listening, I pulled up on Twitter this tweet from yesterday. Jerry, take a look at this. So here is a tweet from the AP. APnews.com headline: FDA restricts J&J's COVID-19 vaccine due to blood clot risk. So that was up. That's the Associated Press Twitter account. Then somebody else tweets out, Breaking 911 tweets out the same thing. FDA restricts J&J's COVID-19 vaccine due to blood clot risk. And they get a misleading label from Twitter on here, which is just crazy. Again, same headline, but one gets a warning label and one does not, and that's clearly political. By the way, Jerry, my Twitter spigot continues to be left open. I am getting a great reading.
Again, I'm pushing back on this. I have experienced no change in Twitter, and frankly, from that tweet, we know that Twitter, the so-called free speech, hasn't happened. Well, I mean, there are still accounts banned and being banned, and there are still these rules that make no sense.
And I'm not I'm again not saying that Elon Musk was waving his magic wand and things were going to be perfect immediately. Again, talking about my own anecdotal experience. Yeah. But you're absolutely correct, right? Because we now know that there's this new movie out. I want to talk real quick. Want to talk about this. By the way, we're well into our rip from the headline segment. This new movie, 2000 Mules, Jerry, are you familiar with this?
I heard about it. I don't know what it's about though.
It is this is right in, well, it's in both of our wheelhouses. It's Dinesh D'Souza's new movie.
Oh, yes. Yes.
All right, and it's about
the ballot harvesting. Yes.
So let me tell you something talking about this. So Twitter has apparently already shut down the 2000 Mules account. And that's crazy. But I'll tell you something else.
But again, going back to everyone who was like, what a great day for democracy, and all these conservatives praising Elon Musk. What did I say during this period? I said,
no, absolutely. Be cautious. You don't. And this is my point. But I want to give you another example, right? Because this also gets into Facebook and Google and others. So I went, Jerry, because I wasn't aware of what 2000 Mules was. Right. So I went to YouTube to go and find the trailer, did a search for 2000 Mules. Maybe I'll pull this up after we talk to Carrie Severino. You cannot, if you search for a 2000 Mules trailer on YouTube, you will not get the trailer. If you search for it on Google, however, a link to the trailer on YouTube comes up, which is just crazy. I want to see this. I don't know how. I mean, I'm assuming, right, that that Dinesh D'Souza did his homework on this. Everybody seems very happy with this.
Look, I'm so sick and tired of these conversations. The fact is that the social media, academia, corporate, Democrat communities fortify the 2020 election. The fact that we can't say that there was mischief, that there was a fortification. Look, in their own words from Time magazine, they say now that they did everything to game the board, so to speak, so Trump would lose.
Yeah.
And also, we know now that ballot harvesting. Look, Democrats were against ballot harvesting in 2018. Yep. Because they know that it is a recipe for disaster and for voter suppression and for fraud. And again, Twitter, all of you praising Twitter,
as I said,
praising
Jerry,
Elon Musk, it makes me angry because I'm so sick of this. One guy, some conservative or celebrity or rich billionaire agrees with conservatives like for a nanosecond, and then everyone just bows down and bends over. The fact is that Elon Musk hasn't done anything. Zero. Twitter is not any better. And again,
but Jerry, I'm telling you that for
it doesn't
some
mean anything.
People, it is.
It doesn't mean it.
I'm seeing it for
it's
myself.
Anecdotal. You know what? I woke up this morning without any back pain. That means I must have slept better last night. It's magic thinking.
No. It is not magical thinking, Jerry.
Of course it is.
No.
Then why is 2000 Mules banned?
Because Jerry, again, he didn't wave a magic wand and fix everything overnight. This is a lot more complicated than this.
So Dinesh, right? D'Souza, who is much bigger in the movement than you or I.
Yes.
So Andrew Langer, like, he's okay, but everyone else is not. I mean, come on.
Again, Jerry, it's no one. I don't think anybody took a look at my Twitter feed and said, right. Again, I think we're misdiagnosing the problem here. I think
you want to see something that's not there.
Jerry,
Then how come my Twitter feed is exactly the same?
Well, Jerry, but you've already said that we talked about this. You don't use Twitter nearly as much as other people.
I have tweeted out more in the last 3 days than I have in the previous 3 years. And no change.
Well, okay, but you're only doing it over the course of 3 days. So I mean, what I'm saying is, and I don't know what the subject matter is that you're tweeting out. So the way the algorithm works is, right, and this is exactly what Ari Melber was so concerned about on MSNBC last week, right, which is this idea that certain topics and certain subjects, they get turned down and other topics and subjects get turned up. And so
this is obfuscating. We need to repeal Section 230. We need to treat Twitter and social media as if they are publishing houses, and the same. They're regulating speech anyway.
I think it's this issue of the common carrier issue and
yes,
and how they
or that. But the bottom line is, no one's talking about either one of those issues because everyone is saying woohoo, Elon Musk.
Right, but time out for a second, right? I mean, this is, again, as things come up, the shiny object changes, and then the folks will come back and start talking about these things again if the problem itself is not fixed. Right, people are not gonna ignore it. Right, if it persists that subjects like 2,000 Mules are muted, right, then they will talk about this. And again, right, what happens on Twitter is one aspect of it. And again, let me pull this up real quick, and then we do need to sort of intro our subject matter. So let me share this. So I went, this is YouTube. I go on YouTube, I do a search for 2,000 Mules trailer, and this is page 1. The first thing that comes up is Tom Hanks' Greyhound movie, which I never watched. Did you ever watch that?
No.
Nothing, no trailer here, except the first reference to 2,000 Mules is somebody in Russia talking about it, and then somebody else talking about it down here, and then some trailer for something called 2,000 Miles. But if you do go to Google and you Google 2,000 Mules trailer, the YouTube link pops up, and sure enough, it's actually there on YouTube. So again, it's I don't care about that. Let's pause that. Anyway, so so I agree with you. There are still problems that need to be dealt with. So Jerry,
I'm just I'm in such a bad mood because
are you in an Anna Gasparian kind of mood?
Well, I'm sick and tired of lies and fraudsters and hustlers. Jane Miller from WBAL TV is an investigative reporter. And she has been editorializing.
Gary, I'm going to caution you to tread lightly here. I'm your friend.
Well, I'm just going to say something.
All right.
She's editorializing on the abortion issue. Yeah. What we need is our media, to report on this issue. It's too important.
Hold on out for a second. Let's be really clear about something here. Because I think, it gets to the conversations that you and I have had in the past and in the far past, right? There is a real difference, and we have to be really, I don't proclaim myself, and I know when you're on the air, don't proclaim yourself to be a journalist. I'm not a reporter.
You know what? I've decided to change that. I've worked in healthcare policy longer than reporting on healthcare policy, longer than most of these others who are reporting on healthcare policy.
Sure, no, I get this, Jerry, but my point is, okay, but my point is when you are in your guise, so when Jane Miller is in her guise or report,
again, I say Jane Miller because I follow her and I respect her.
No.
But the thing is,
clear, but someone who is reporter X, right, and is supposed to be reporting needs to report on the facts, the who, what, why, when,
right, and again, and we've seen this.
Words matter on this, and so this is like the conversation that I had with, and I'm not gonna throw this person under the bus, but a conversation I had with a reporter in which I took issue with this person's characterization of the Supreme Court leak that happened earlier this week as being unusual. And I said to this person, no, it's not unusual. It is unprecedented. And this person pushed back on that. And they said, well, it was this and that. It's exceedingly rare. I'm like, no, it's not exceedingly rare.
It's never happened.
It has never happened. I sent this person, several screenshots and said, the best minds, the best scholars on the Supreme Court are saying this has never happened before. Now, there have been leaks about votes and there have been leaks about issues surrounding the court. Never has a decision, a draft opinion been leaked beforehand. And I felt that the choice of unusual as opposed to unprecedented was editorializing.
Of course,
it was putting your
it is editorializing, just like when you have the Baltimore Sun and other newspapers and media outlets in Maryland reporting that Governor Hogan, who, again, I'm a critic of Governor Hogan, but he is getting political pressure from elected officials in Annapolis who want to score cheap political points. He's getting political pressure to break the law. Maryland, this last session passed, and I know we're tight on time.
No, we're fine.
Passed legislation to expand the type of training, the type of medical professional who can perform an abortion.
Yeah.
And then they also released new monies to train such persons. The problem is that the law doesn't take effect in terms of the expansion of the WHO, doesn't take effect until July.
Yeah.
And the money's not released until 2024.
Yeah.
And so you have news outlets reporting Hogan won't release the money. Well, Hogan can't release the money.
Yes.
The law doesn't take effect until 2024, or the funding for the law doesn't take effect until 2024. So the governor can't do anything. And yet you have the news media in Maryland and you have the political establishment in Maryland saying that look at this. He doesn't care about women. He doesn't care about women's rights. And again, that's editorializing. That's wrong. And you have the woman who's running for state comptroller in the state of Maryland. Again, the elected chief accountant, who is saying, shame on the governor. He doesn't support women's rights. Well, she's the accountant. She wants to be the state accountant, and she doesn't understand that monies for this training don't come into law, don't come into the budget until 2024.
They're not made available. They are not made available for utilization for a year and a half. Yes,
right.
This is, but it's Maryland, so it doesn't matter. Listen, after we talk to Carrie Severino, let's circle back to this issue with Hogan. Because I wanna get your thoughts as to exactly what you think Hogan would do. Because I'm not entirely certain. Well, I don't know what Hogan would do in this if he had the power to turn on the spigot, as it were. I'm not sure that he would. Given,
well, I'll make a prediction. There must be some mechanism, right, or some let's push it up to the line that allows monies to be released. If that's possible, my prediction is Hogan will release the money and he'll say, well, my hands are tied.
Interesting. Well, we'll talk.
That's what I think.
I think that would be the death knell for Hogan in 2024. And now it's time for expert advice.
Expert advice.
Well, welcome to our expert advice segment. We're so honored to be joined today by a true expert in her field. Her name is Carrie Severino. She is the president of the Judicial Crisis Network. She's got an amazing pedigree in terms of her professional career. Not only is she a Harvard-educated attorney, and no, we don't hold that against you, Carrie, but she also clerked not just for Justice Clarence Thomas, but also Judge David Sentel. So just an extraordinary, wonderful career. So let's start here. Jerry and I were just talking about this, Carrie, about me tweeting at a reporter that I know who called the leak of this draft opinion unusual. I said it was unprecedented, and I think there's a huge distinction between the two. Where do you come down on this?
Yeah, and right after it happened, everyone's going, "Oh my gosh, it's crazy the Supreme Court would leak." And a bunch of people started replying saying, "Well, actually, there are some things that have leaked." And that's true. There are some leaks that have happened in the past. Right before Roe versus Wade itself was announced, time was leaked, the actual outcome of the case. But we're talking about knowing which direction the case was going to go, like shortly before it came out. Yeah. This is incredible. I mean, as someone who works there, and in DC, you kind of get used to, okay, Congress is as leaky as a sieve. The White House purposely leaks things half the time. The Supreme Court doesn't work that way. Yeah. Having an entire draft opinion leaked is literally unprecedented. I don't think it's ever happened before in American history. And it's even more significant because it happened months probably before the decision was scheduled to come out. And I think it's obvious to everyone, was done with malicious intent. Yeah. It was done specifically to try to intimidate, to threaten the justices, saying, "Hey, here's what's going to happen if something doesn't change." And so now you got people literally posting their private home addresses of the justices who would have signed this opinion and saying, "Hey, let's go protest at this house, their houses." This is serious threats. The Supreme Court has major walls that are going up around it right now, trying to just defend the building, because we saw after Kavanaugh's confirmation, people were literally walking right up to the front door trying to get in. I mean, it is outrageous. Some of these justices have small children at home. They're going to walk home from school through a gauntlet of protesters, potentially violent. I don't think so.
I'm sorry. Why hasn't it, again, in your thinking, why hasn't the Biden administration, Jen Psaki, the White House spokesperson, had an opportunity yesterday, to kind of cooler heads prevail, calm things down? And it seemed to me, but I want to know what you think. It seems to me that she purposefully missed the opportunity.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. She kind of put the Biden White House stamp of approval on these protests. Oh, well, these are going to be private or peaceful protests. We know what peaceful protests look like, right? I mean, if the building's on fire, they're like, yeah, but it's mostly peaceful. This is outrageous that the president wouldn't say, "Hey, look, I might disagree with this draft too. Come and protest at the Supreme Court." Hundreds of thousands of people every year have been protesting Roe v. Wade in DC. They march. There's women, there's children, there's grandparents. They do it peacefully, and they don't go to the justices' homes. Can you imagine if they went to Ruth Bader Ginsburg's home and were, waving signs and shouting? I don't think so. That's not what's happening. Of course, no surprise, because Jen Psaki herself used to work for one of the most radical left-wing dark money groups out there, Demand Justice. This is a group who's like board members saying the Constitution's trash and has to be scrapped, whose head is saying that there need to be more leaks from the Supreme Court and is holding up this leaker as a hero. I mean, they will stop at nothing and will stop at no institution. Are they unwilling to bulldoze to achieve their liberal policy goals here?
Carrie, let's pull it back a little bit, because you are a former clerk for Justice Thomas. You've been inside this environment. We have Chief Justice Roberts saying, thankfully, I'm glad he finally showed a little backbone and said, this is just terrible. It's earth shaking. What has happened here? We cannot allow this to stand. Talk about why it's, as you said, the other branches can be leaky as sieves in terms of their decision-making process. We want the administrative state to be as transparent as possible. We want the people to be able to have a say and put political pressure on the legislative process. Talk about why this is so earth-shaking within the court, and why the court's deliberations are supposed to be held essentially sub rosa, behind closed doors.
So the clerks and their justices, and those are pretty much the only people who have access to this opinion. Obviously, you could have someone stealing it from within, some other way, but it's really the clerks and the justices. And the justices need to be able to trust their clerks implicitly. This is just basically an extension of themselves, helping them draft things, helping them research and dig into these opinions. So that confidence used to be really held incredibly sacred. If you talk to people who clerked the court, they won't even tell you which case they focused on and worked on. If they helped draft something, they're not going to tell you any of these details, because it's so it's really a bond that is kind of unlike any other.
Let me interrupt you for a second. Time out, because I want to say, I've always wanted to know, for instance, which of Justice Sandra Day O'Connor's clerks wrote the 1992 New York versus United States opinion. And I've been told you're never going to find out who that is. And I recognize that. My favorite Supreme Court opinion of all time, would love to sit down and talk about that. And I know this. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely
I'm a nerd this way.
Andrew Langer is such a nerd that he has a favorite.
I do.
He also has trading cards, Supreme Court Justice trading cards.
Yes.
Well, you know, and even if I'm talking to other Thomas clerks, I wouldn't tell them which cases I helped draft or vice versa. I mean, it is really close hold. And that is so the court can trust each other. And remember, as vicious as the politics are in these other branches, these justices have a collegiality that is legendary. They know, imagine, you need to work with this person literally for the rest of your life. Do you want to make enemies? No, you want to be able to work together. And the level of professionalism that was evident there, unfortunately, maybe it used to exist in other branches. I don't know. It doesn't exist in a lot of other places in this world. And I think there would have been an understanding of, hey, if someone leaked something like this, that's going to be the end of their career. It's not just you're going to get fired from the Supreme Court, but who's going to ever want to hire you? And I think people would have policed that on both sides of the aisle of someone. I think
you put out a series of tweets earlier this week, and I thought they were very appropriate, and also made me think about Justice Ginsburg differently. Talk about that, how the kind of Justice Ginsburg's grace with her colleagues, and her attitude towards her colleagues.
Yeah, that was one of the things that had me most frustrated about this campaign to dox the justices. They've already put up this map of all their houses, right? But the group is calling itself Ruth Sent Us.
Yeah.
And they're invoking Justice Ginsburg. And obviously Justice Ginsburg was very passionate about abortion rights, among other things, right? So I have no doubt which side of this opinion she would have been on. So to that extent, they're right. But the idea that they are using her legacy as an excuse to harass her colleagues, and her colleagues who she held in such high esteem. Her husband, who was a legendary chef, would bake birthday cakes for all of them, and they would go out to dinner with them. Everyone has heard of her relationship with Justice Scalia, so close, even though they were on the opposite sides of the political spectrum, really the best of friends. But that extended to every member of the court. And I was talking about, Justice Thomas, who gave a beautiful and moving eulogy of her after she passed away. And again, opposite sides of the spectrum, but he has told me too, like, yeah, you couldn't ask for a better colleague. So even though we disagreed, we loved each other. You could see him in her as she got older, he would always offer his arm to help her off the bench. I mean, there was a true love amongst all of these colleagues. And with Justice Kavanaugh, she watched his crazy confirmations, and she actually stood up and said, hey, this is not how it should be done. Yeah. The way things used to be done is, and she went out of her way to welcome him and Justice Gorsuch in front of hostile audiences to say, hey, I really respect my new colleagues. They're good people. They're good Americans. And so she was trying to bridge that gap. And that civility gap is just a chasm today. And I think we should honor her memory by going in the opposite direction and trying to have that collegiality again.
And I would be remiss if I didn't point out that Carrie Severino also co-authored a book with Molly Hemingway from The Federalist on the Kavanaugh confirmation. Fantastic book.
Oh, yes.
Pull up a picture on this. And because before we get to that, I may ask you about Kavanaugh and what I knew of his stellar reputation before he was nominated. But let's focus on Justice Ginsburg for a moment, and let's talk about the legacy of Roe. Because what I find very odd about this RBG centric protesting of this is Justice Ginsburg was critical of Roe v. Wade. She thought that there were problems in that opinion. Talk about that.
Yeah, and it's something that actually came up during her confirmation hearing, because a few people on the left are like, wait a minute, can we trust this woman? I think at the end of the day, yep, they obviously could. Sure. But she criticized it because she said she actually thought that decision went too far. It was just one Texas law that was more protective of fetal life than most places in the country. And so she said they could have just struck down that law and not gone so far as to craft a whole new regime for the country. And she pointed out that what this ended up doing was not to put the issue to rest politically, but actually to ossify and maybe deepen some of those political divisions. And we have seen now 50 years practically of frustration over this, and the way it has distorted the court, the way it's distorted the confirmation process, because that decision has been such a focus, and it was such a illustration of the courts being political in a way that judges never should be. They should be, again, as even Ginsburg acknowledged, deciding the case before them, but not reaching out to just try to personally craft a whole new regime. And I think that's what Alito's draft opinion gets at, because he says, hey, look, this is not, we're not saying now abortion's illegal across the country, although many people, including the president, have made that misrepresentation.
Right.
That's not what the decision does at all. It actually says this is going to be now decided in the political branches. That's how it was decided for the vast majority of American history until Roe wrested it from the people's grasp. And it drives me crazy too, because I hear people calling this an anti-democratic decision, which is ludicrous. The Democratic result would say, okay, everyone go and get your democratically elected representatives, and you tell us what kind of law you want. Not, hey, I'm going to look at some opinion poll and a bunch of unelected judges are going to then make a one-size-fits-all law for the nation based on that. So this is going to go absolutely right back to the democratic process. And we're not going to see probably as extreme a result as either side would want to see. You're going to see a lot of states doing a lot of different things here with that, but that are all going to much more closely match what the American people want to see and do on this really contentious issue than what Roe does. And now it's the chance, if you feel really strongly about this issue, this is the opportunity now to convince your fellow citizens, your neighbors, your friends to decide to change the law in the direction you think is most just.
Joe Biden, President Biden, has said again this week that, and again in a very incoherent manner, that this might cause segregation of children based upon their identity.
Yeah.
And of course, Jen Psaki was asked about what specific law the president had in mind. She couldn't offer one up. But the question is, everyone, I say everyone, I exaggerate to make a point, but those who are concerned about this decision, again, not even a decision yet, by the way, right? We don't know yet how the court's going to decide. But if it does strike Roe, what does that mean for gay marriage, for interracial marriage, for contraception, for segregation, and all these other issues that the left is saying it's going to be this trickle down effect of restricting rights?
We are seeing some of the most outrageous, overblown fear mongering that I have ever heard of. And the president's analogy struck me as particularly bizarre, because when was it? Has anyone ever suggested we need to have separate segregated schools for LGBT kids? I mean, like, what? He comes up with some of the weirdest stuff. But you're hearing people saying, for example, the one that just is it's stupid to me is the idea of people saying that somehow Loving versus Virginia, the case that said that anti-miscegenation laws were unconstitutional, that's going to get overturned. Are you kidding me? Justice Thomas, who himself is a Black man married to a white woman, he's going to say, oh yeah, these, Justice Barrett, who herself has children who are both Black and white. I'm like, you guys have got to be kidding me. On top of which, it requires the idea that there is a state in the country or a jurisdiction of any sort that's going to actually pass that law. Have you ever heard anyone advocate for passage of such a law? I mean, that is so ludicrous. They're saying Brown versus Board of Education is going to be underdone. The decision actually talks about Brown favorably and says this is an illustration of the kind of thing that we should be doing, which is taking a bad precedent, which is what happened in Brown. There was the separate but equal Plessy versus Ferguson case. And Brown said, you know what? We know that's been decided. It's been decided that case was on the books for longer than Roe was decided. Right. And the court said, I'm sorry, it's wrong. And we're not going to follow it just because it's old. We're going to have to bring it into keeping with the Constitution. So it is so crazy because they're using that saying, oh, we're overturn Brown. No, they said they're doing exactly what Brown did in this case, which is bring American law into keeping with the Constitution.
Carrie, let me ask you about that issue of stare decisis, the reliance on precedent. Because I know, for instance, like I talk quite a bit about the Kelo case and how the Kelo case relied on 120 years of precedent and came to a fundamentally wrong decision. I've said that justices had an opportunity in that case. This was for those of you who don't know, this was the eminent domain case in which a woman's a home was taken for a Pfizer parking lot. The court had an opportunity to make a real stand on the law. Got into it with somebody the other day about this issue. What is the line? Do you have a line that you use or you think about, or did when you were clerking, was there a line that you had in mind when you should rely on precedent, and when precedent ought to be broken and something ought to be overturned?
Yeah. So, caveat is I clerk for Justice Thomas, who probably has the lowest standard for going back to what the Constitution actually says of anyone. I mean, some justices will wait till something is just absolutely egregiously wrong before they would overturn it. Justice Thomas, I think if there were a case that were a close call, or if there were a case, in one thing that a lot of justices say is if it's a statutory interpretation case, they're just interpreting a law.
Yeah.
If they get it wrong, Congress can fix it. And they've done it before. They've said, hey, you know what? We didn't like the way you interpreted that. We're going to go amend that law and make sure it's clear. Very easy to do. It's very hard to amend the Constitution. It's possible. That's the better way to do it than try to get judges to change it.
Hear.
So, but if they get the Constitution wrong, I think all of the justices acknowledge that this is something you have to fix. So there's a few factors the court looks at. They look at how wrong is it. They look at whether it's created reliance interests, like have we built up a whole regime based on this law. They look at how hard it is, how hard it has been for courts to administer it. Because sometimes you got laws that are cases that are so bad that it's clear it's in conflict with all these other things. And frankly, Roe on all those areas fails. And it's interesting, even some important cases like Brown versus Board of Education, getting rid of segregation actually did have to change a huge regime of segregated schools in the country. So it's not to say that just because people have relied on it, you leave it in place. Sometimes it's just so wrong that you have to fix it. I love the analogy Justice Thomas used to give. He'd say, people come to this court asking us to follow a case, and it's like adding a car to this train. And you want me to add one more car to the train. And before I'm going to add that caboose on, I want to walk to the front of the train and figure out, where is this train going? Who's driving it? And he said, sometimes you go forward. So he kind of traces these cases. Well, I'm following this case, which was following that case, which is following that case. And he goes, get to the front. And sometimes you find in the engine compartment, it's like a chimpanzee running this thing. You're like, oh my gosh, we don't add another train on the car onto this train if this is a train that's out of control.
I love that.
Being run by a lunatic. So we have to go back and see, what are we actually following? And there's a lot of cases where you do then say, okay, great, this is good. I love, there was a recent case where the justice said, hey, when we took this case, my instinct is this has got to be wrong, right? But then you do the historical research and you go, hey, you know what? This is actually well-founded after all. That is an honest judicial position where you go and you really do the work and you say, what is the foundation of this law? And not do I like the results, do I like the policy, but is this legally justified? And if it is, you follow it. And if it's not, you don't.
But on that note, you have many members of Congress, the Senate and the House, Democrats saying that Justices Gorsuch and Kavanaugh lied, and they should be brought back, and they should be held accountable. And again, I find this very interesting because I know that Justice Sotomayor talked about Heller precedent, and then later in a dissent said Heller should be overturned. Will this be a new precedent that if we're going to start bringing Supreme Court justices back to be charged or to be impeached?
First of all, I don't think they can necessarily be impeached based on things they said during the confirmation hearing.
Sure.
I think that there could be exceptions to that, but I think until they've taken that position, they can't be impeached from that position. The second point is, if you listen to and I was on CNN the other day and they played all of the quotes from Justice Gorsuch and Justice Kavanaugh and Justice Barrett, and I was like, you all just listen to it with me. They said things like, one of them was like, Roe versus Wade is an important precedent of the Supreme Court decided in 1973. I think that's what Justice Gorsuch said. What part of that is false? What part of that is overturning it, inconsistent with? One of the justices said it's a precedent. It's been upheld many times by the Supreme Court repeatedly. Yes, that's true. I mean, all of those are just factual, descriptive statements. And in fact, it's interesting. Susan Collins herself, who's now kind of complaining, saying people misled her. She said at the time of their confirmations about I believe it was Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, none of them made any promises to me about how they would vote on cases, and they shouldn't and they couldn't because they can't promise how they would vote. That was basically what Justice Barrett said about Roe. She's like, look, I can't tell you what I think about various cases because I can't telegraph how I'm going to vote in these cases. And she says that, and now they're like, you lied. I mean, that's ludicrous. If you look at Justice Sotomayor's statements I think she was trying to say the same thing, but my read is she went a lot closer to saying, I am going to respect the individual rights recognized in Heller or something like that, which she later dissented from.
Right.
So, you know, none of us thinks that they're going to go in and don't have ideas about cases going in. But if they're going to be honest, they're not going to promise how they're going to vote because they haven't had a chance to look and do that research. And the fact that a justice overturns precedent is not anything surprising. There was a footnote in this draft opinion that was over a page long, just of the footnote, giving a list of all of the cases the Supreme Court, and it wasn't even all of them, I'm sure, it's just like a illustrative list of cases where the Supreme Court has overturned precedent. And I'm telling you, every single member of this court has voted to overturn precedent at various times. That includes Justice Sotomayor and Justice Kagan and Justice Breyer just as much as the rest of them. So let's not pretend that somehow this is something that, you know, they've taken a vow never to overturn precedent. None of them has, and none of them will.
Our guest has been Carrie Severino, the president of the Judicial Crisis Network. We'll put up a link to JCN on our page. She's also the author, along with Molly Hemingway, Justice on Trial, the Kavanaugh Confirmation, and the Future of the Supreme Court. Carrie, thank you so very much for joining us.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
And now it's time for the bottom line.
The bottom line.
Well, wow. I mean, that once again, that was exactly the kind of perspective that we needed. I wish we had more time because I would have asked her questions about getting into the depths of the decision, but talking about some of these other issues and what the end result is. We didn't even get into it, Jerry, beforehand, because one of the other things that the president said, and I tweeted it to you, he said the quiet part out loud.
Yes.
The other day. Do you want me to play? Well, I'm not even going to play the clip because he had this whole word salad about abortion and about life and about choice, and he literally used the phrase. And I think that this is the case, right? I don't think any president has ever used the phrase abort a child. Every president has been careful and talked about the fetus. You know, unless it's
or just terms, these euphemisms: reproductive health,
yes,
women's rights, women's health, abortion rights, and you're right. What I've been asking people, and again, I've been very active on Twitter this week. Unusual for me,
yes.
But I feel compelled to respond to all of the misinformation, all the purposeful lies about abortion, the science of abortion. And the president said the truth out loud,
yes,
by mistake. He said, essentially, right? He said, abort a child. Abortion destroys a human life, period. At fertilization, there is a distinct genetic code different from any other human being on the planet. And to suggest this isn't human life is absolutely beyond science. It's faith, it's religion. And here's the thing, Andrew, just to make this the uncomfortable part, put it up front. I am pro-life.
An hour into the show.
I am pro-life with no exceptions.
Yeah.
I think it's a life. I think it's destroying a life. It's killing a human life.
Yeah.
That said, I am happy, eager to create policy that will do exactly what Bill Clinton and Democrats believed that Joe Biden believed up until yesterday.
Yeah.
And that is, if we're going to have this procedure, if it's going to be the law, and most likely it'll still be the law in all 50 states. There'll be restrictions, more restrictions in some states, but every single state will allow for some kind of abortion. But the bottom line is that why don't we go to a place where the most Americans agree, and that is where the European Union is.
Sure.
After the first trimester, you put restrictions on abortion. Well, period.
And here's the thing that it comes down to for me, right? Which is, and I agree with you. And it's I've spent a lot of time thinking about my position on life and abortion over the years. But it's one of the things I've been thinking about is there was a really angry moment God, who was it who was on? I think it was CNN. I have the clip here. I retweeted it out earlier this week, where there was a pro-life activist on CNN, and whoever the host was got very angry with him. As this
Yes.
pro-life person was really speaking deliberately about the issue.
Was that CNN or was that one of the networks?
No, maybe
Was
something.
it
Maybe it was
one of the
ABC
networks.
News.
It was
Maybe
it was a gentleman reporter who
I think it was
went
Jonathan Carl.
berserk.
Maybe I got to go look.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, how come you're not charging them with murder? How come if you think it's murder, how come you're not charging them as with accessories or murder? And it's like, okay, something. Again, this is why this issue has to go to the states and has to be democratically decided, because different states will view it in different ways, just as different states view other crimes in different ways and have different penalties for different kinds of crimes in different ways.
Right.
And there are different levels and different things that trigger it.
Right. And again, I want to be careful to offer clarity here to our listeners. I am pro-life without exception. However, if I were a member of Congress or a member of the state legislature, I would work with my colleagues to make abortion rare.
Yes.
And I would work to change the culture. That's what I do in my everyday life. My family, we're engaged with pregnancy crisis centers. My wife was the president of one of the largest state-based pro-life groups in the country for years. So the Rogers family is engaged to change the culture. However, in the political process, I would work with others to make abortion to implement reasonable restrictions to make abortion rare. The problem is that the other side has lost any sense of themselves.
Yeah.
Tim Ryan, who was a moderate moderate Democrat, won the primary in Ohio.
Yeah.
Everyone for years has said that this guy Ryan would be a good presidential candidate because he's a moderate Democrat.
Sure.
He was asked this week, point blank.
Oh, yeah.
Where would you restrict abortion? And he said, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
And this is where the Republicans or those who are pro-life, this is where we need to bring the conversation. It's not that the left wants abortion rights or abortion access to abortion. They want abortion from fertilization until seconds before birth. And Andrew, in California and in Maryland, there are proposals to allow for abortion up to 28 days after a birth.
I find galling, but and this is my point, is that this position now is unprecedented. We'll talk about precedent, right? This is an unprecedented position. Right. This is a position that is on the extreme and would make the United States a true outlier in terms of our approach to abortion.
Well, we'd be right there with North Korea, with China. That's where we'd be.
And so this idea, it is, and sort of it gets back into what I wanted to talk about earlier. Let's go and revisit this with regards to Larry Hogan. Because, Hogan, we all know this, is trying to chart out this moderate position to make himself different from the other Republican candidates going into 2024. And, I don't know. I mean, it's right. There are two ways to look at this, Jerry, right? There's the one part of this, which is, how does Larry Hogan appeal to any portion of the Republican primary voting base if he were to go and accept any part of the Democratic position? But then it gets into this whole conversation that we've had before, Jerry, which is Larry Hogan is trying to court a certain portion of the Democratic electorate that does not exist.
But here's the irony there.
Yeah.
And that is,
and I'm pulling up the abortion map in terms of Europe, but go ahead.
This past week, Larry Hogan gave a speech at the Reagan Library.
Yes.
He gave that speech the same day the unprecedented leak from the Supreme Court. Do you know that he did a flurry of tweets that day after his speech? Never once mentioned what everyone else was talking about, the leak, Roe v. Wade, and he just talked about himself and the better way forward. And I thought to myself, and I tweeted this out, how tone deaf. Everyone in America is having conversation A, but because that conversation and that issue doesn't fit in with how Larry Hogan wants to present himself, he just ignores it.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: he wants to put himself forward as the moderate, non-Trump, reasonable, better way forward candidate. But in Maryland right now, he's being attacked by the Democrats as being an extremist because he won't release these monies to allow for abortion training, something we mentioned earlier in the show. This new law doesn't take effect until later, but they're demanding he enact it now.
Yeah.
He's not doing anything, and they're labeling him an extremist. So how is he going to present himself as the moderate when he's already being called the extremist? Romney was the person who killed people and put a dog on the roof, right?
Yeah, biters of women.
McCain was an angry, unstable person.
Yeah.
The left only likes you, and Hogan doesn't understand this yet. He's so naive. The left only likes you when you are a tool for them to use on their political opponents.
Yeah.
And the moment you're no longer useful, you become Donald Trump. And that's what they're going to do to him. So to answer your question before we get to this map,
sure,
there is no way forward for Larry Hogan.
Yes. Yeah.
If Larry Hogan would not win a Republican primary in the state of Maryland.
Yes.
Never mind in Texas, Florida, or other states.
So I want to pull up. I pulled up this map. I'd seen this the other day, and I was honestly, Jerry, I'll tell you, I was very surprised by this map. So this is a map for those of you who are listening instead of watching it. It is a map comparing state by state in the United States abortion laws, and when you can, more to the point, when you can get an abortion and the restrictions based upon weeks, and then compares this to nations in Europe, some in the European Union, some out of the European Union. And you know, if you look at this map, there are two nations that have, actually I can zoom in, can I? There are two nations that have abortion laws that are on par with the most, not the most, but the least permissive abortion laws in the United, or some of the, anyway, the wide majority of the abortion laws in the United States, Iceland, and I think that would be, that's not Poland. I'm not sure. I've got to go back and look at this. That's the Netherlands, of course. So, you know, you look at this map, and by and large, most of the European nations, the legal limit for when you can have an abortion is between 11 and 20 weeks. Two nations have the legal limit between 1 and 10 weeks, and then a handful of nations have it prohibited, including apparently.
And also, just so you know, too, this map is not updated because California and New York both allow for abortion up until the moment of birth.
Okay.
And so they would be purple on this map. And so for our listeners, there's a map here that shows the vast majority of states in America allow for abortion well into the second and third trimesters.
Yes. Yeah. And
so Roe v. Wade, by the way, Roe v. Wade won't change any of this.
Yeah.
Well, striking down Roe v. Wade doesn't change anything.
That's an important point. I mean, because we started to get into this with Carrie Severino, and then she had to go. Let's be abundantly clear about this, because this is something that I got into again with somebody that I knew, having a conversation about this. Let's assume for a moment that this decision stands as it is. Right. And we don't know that it's going to stand, that this draft was from February. So it is a draft that is more than 2 months old. It is probably going to be another couple of months before the decision itself comes down. We don't know about how the concurrences and the dissents are going to shape up. But the bottom line here is that as the decision is written, it strikes down Roe v. Wade it is narrowly tailored to that and the Casey decision,
Right.
and what it does is it doesn't automatically outlaw abortion in all 50 states. Sorry, go
No,
ahead,
not at
Jay. You can
all.
talk about this.
No, again, California, it's very permissive abortion laws stay in place. Maryland's very permissive abortion laws stay in place. New York, most states from California to Maryland allow for abortion well into the third trimester.
Yeah.
That is grotesque. We are an outlier. The US is an outlier. Our abortion laws are barbaric. I'm sorry to say this, but it's the truth. We are aborting children in this country that are viable outside of the womb. Now, listen, we've been talking about the politics and the law.
Yeah.
We haven't talked about the science or the medicine. And here's one thing. I'll make one statement. The science has changed since 1973.
And that's important.
Right. And that's my only point.
Yeah.
Why don't you think the law should be informed by the most current science?
Well, again, right. I mean, this gets into what we've been, the debate that we've had over the last 2 years about COVID, right? Science.
Right. Exactly right.
Trust the science. We are having greater debates now about the science around COVID and what we did right and what we did wrong, and the anger that ensues when people point out what we did wrong, especially when it comes to schools. And we've talked about the mask issue and what we're now learning about Johnson & Johnson and their vaccine. But the reality is it changes. I want to go back to this issue, and I want to, because I think it's important to sort of explain my position in all of this. We've touched on this in the past. I was pro-choice. And especially as I was sort of coming to my small L libertarian views, I considered that pro-choice position to be, part and parcel of that libertarian position. And then, Jerry, you've heard me tell this story. I was reading about a guy named Murray Sabrin from New Jersey, who was running for governor of New Jersey, and he was a pro-life libertarian, and I didn't know what that was. So I contacted David Bose at the Cato Institute, and I said, "Hey, David, can you explain this to me?" Because David had written a book called Libertarianism, a primer, and he was the go-to guy, and that book's title has now changed. And he said, "Well, Andrew, it's like this. If you believe that the entity inside of a woman's body is a person, and you are an adherent to the concept of the non-initiation of force, then you view the abortion as an initiation of force, and then that person inside the woman has rights." And I thought about that. I thought, wow, that's really interesting. And as my wife got pregnant, as I started to think about the issue more, and we had our kids, and I began to sort of flesh out my thoughts. And this is one of those things when I would have a conversation with my former friend Jenna Ellis. I laid this out, and she didn't like my sort of interpretation. And I'll be real quick about this, Jerry. All just law is born out of the intersection of rights, right? Rights come into conflict with one another. And you create, because rights translate into action, and sometimes the action of one person in the exercise of their rights comes into conflict with the exercise of one person and their rights. And so we create laws to mediate between that within that interaction. And whichever party is most aggrieved, the law weighs down in protecting the party that is more aggrieved. Right? So your First Amendment right to dance around in a wild interpretive dance does not mean that you can strike me across the bridge of my nose. I am harmed by that, therefore the law comes down on my side. Or again, in the exercise of free speech, you can say what you want, but if you lie about me and you damage my reputation, the law comes in and says you can't do that. That is a limit to your free speech rights. And the law then goes and is even more protective of those least able to advocate on their own behalf. So we have laws to protect the health and welfare of children that go well beyond laws that protect the health and welfare of adults, because children can't make decisions for themselves. And
Right.
so this is, and so when I viewed it in that framework, I said, oh, well, this makes perfect sense. So the entity inside the woman, the person inside of the woman, that entity has rights. That child inside of the woman can't speak for himself or herself. Therefore, the law and society at large must speak for that person in their protection. And this is why we have laws against abortion, why it's not about my body, my choice. That's why when Whoopi Goldberg comes out and says, this decision is between me and my doctor and my child, well, okay. You're the one making the decision for the child. That's why the law advocates.
I'm going to say something. I wanted to ask you this off mic, but I'm going to ask it on mic because it's very controversial and provocative. And that is, and people get canceled over this.
Oh, but time out before you ask me the question. And what I like about, frankly, I'm going to say this, what I did to toot my own horn, what I like about my way of viewing it is that it, again, sets aside religion. Right. It sets a, you don't have to be Christian.
I want to raise that because there are some saying that essentially, if you're pro-life, you feel abortion is wrong, and that's part of your religion or your faith, well, then don't have an abortion. Well, there's lots of problems there. Number one, there's Medicaid and public dollars, and there's, again, Susan Collins, Senator from Maine, has not voted to codify Roe into federal law because she believes for a conscience bailout. If you feel it's wrong, you shouldn't have to perform one. Sure. And Congress has in its Roe v. Wade legislation that is put forward, it would force doctors to perform abortions, which is, anyway, my point is that the reason abortion is complicated because it involves forcing doctors to do certain procedures, forcing taxpayers to pay for something that they deem as killing an innocent life. But let me just take a step back. This is the provocative part of this, and that is,
there's nothing provocative in what you just said.
Well, but the thing is that I think it's appropriate. Remember this: the abolitionist movement was started by evangelical Christians, Quakers in Great Britain, in the UK. Their belief, their anti-slavery position, their reason was informed by their faith. The civil rights movement, remember, Dr. King was Reverend Dr. King. There's a great religious tradition that propelled the civil rights movement. So for those, the apartheid, anti-apartheid, Desmond Tutu, Bishop Tutu said, for those who say that politics and religion don't mix, what Bible, whose Bible are they reading? The point is that great social movements that have expanded human rights and equal rights, have had their start with people of faith. The American Revolution, right? You go back, and I studied this when I was in school, and Erica did her end paper on this, and that is it was the revival. The great revivals that were happening in the colonies that helped spur on the revolutionary spirit. So even the American Revolution had its start with people of faith. So this idea that you can just push faith out of the public square, I don't think you're doing that, by the way.
Oh, no.
But I do think that when you come to this issue, it has to be science, faith, and reason. Now, I still haven't said the provocative thing. I'll say it now.
I'm waiting for this, Jerry.
So Dred Scott, the Dred Scott decision, denied personhood to the not just the African slave, but the Black American. Chief Justice Taney, is it Taney or Taney? Taney. Chief Justice Taney said specifically that African people, whether free or enslaved, whether born free, made free, or enslaved, they were not a person in the same sense as a white person. He said for the most part, the decision said it denied personhood to Africans in America. And he viewed the majority decision viewed Africans as property to be bought, sold, or inherited. And he said specifically in the decision that Africans living in America were not included in we the people. Now, here's my point. My point is that we enslaved people in this country because we denied them their personhood. In abortion, the abortion debate, it's not about is it human? Of course it's human. It's not a question of does it feel pain at a certain point? Does it have a heartbeat at a certain point? Does it have a different blood type potentially than the mother at a certain? Yes, 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 yes. The science points to that this is a human life. So what the left says is, it might be a life, but it's not a person.
Yes. Right.
And again, this is what happens when you objectify and dehumanize. Whatever it is becomes property. And it's wrong. And the provocative thing is that there are people who would want to cancel me as racist.
Yeah.
Because I make this analogy between the pro-slavery arguments and the pro-abortion arguments. And the fact is that they mirror each other. Well, sorry, I took a long time.
There's nothing, I don't think there's anything controversial about it. It is the objectification, right? And it gets down to this discussion that's been had this week, right? As even as Joe Biden says the quiet part out loud about aborting a child. There's this statement that says, well, this should be between a woman and her doctor because it is such a monumental decision to be made. It's such an important decision to be made. And the counter to that is, well, yes, of course it is. If, then you are admitting that there's the recognition that you're ending a life here. We didn't even get into this. Actually, I want to shift gears real quick, Jerry, because there was this tweet that came out yesterday. Oh boy, I got to find this. The comedian who tweeted out about the issue. I know I should have pulled this up before.
Well, as you're doing that,
please.
I often think because there are many politicians who are tweeting out about Roe v. Wade now.
Yeah.
And you look at their biographies, or even they say it in their tweets. I'm a mother of 3, and I'm pro-choice. I'm a father of 4. I'm pro-choice. I really want to ask the question. Well, when in your pregnancy, or when in your partner or your spouse's pregnancy, did you decide that your child was a person and human that should be born? Yeah. Like when? Like there's something very unnerving and unseemly about these people who shout out their abortions or their support for abortion, and they have 3 kids.
There was a very strange video, and I still don't know if it was a parody or not. Someone testifying at some city council meeting about abortion rights and sort of talking about, essentially, it must have been a parody, someone proudly discussing sort of how they use abortion as birth control. And it was very unseemly. I want to go here. I don't know who Alex Falcone is, but he tweeted out, this is a change of tone for me on here, but I don't think anyone actually believes that fetuses are people. I think they're lying. There are almost 1 million miscarriages each year in America. It happens to almost everybody, but we're not constantly getting invited to the funeral. And as someone who has been invited to a funeral for a friend whose wife had a miscarriage, I can tell you that that's not true. I'm actually genuinely shocked that the tweet is still up. I've given it another 3 days before the guy has to take it down. Go ahead.
Eric and I have 5 children, and we're very blessed. Erica, we never had a miscarriage.
Yeah.
But I know this. I know that I fell in love with my children the moment I knew that Erica was pregnant.
Yeah.
Literally fell in love with them. And I know that if Erica had miscarried, my mom miscarried twice, and she counts those 2 as potentially could have been our brother or sister.
Sure.
And my mom talks about all the time how someday in heaven we'll know those 2 children. The fact is that miscarriage, yes, moms and dads who lose a child through miscarriage believe just that, feel just that, and that is they've lost a child.
Yeah. And you know something, and you know, I don't know this guy. I don't know who Alex Falcone is.
But
It's clearly it's someone who. Listen, I don't want to engage.
But
in
the irony there too.
Let me make my point. My point. The point is, you know, when people have the devastating news of a miscarriage, and for some people, maybe more devastating than others.
Yes, of course.
But you know something, you know, I'm gonna say it. You know, F you, Alex Falcone, that people aren't grieving in the public way that you want them to grieve when this happens. It's a very private, like everything else. It's a private thing. Jerry, I want to at some point, because we're running short. Actually,
but there's one comment on this, and that is he uses the term fetus, right?
Yes. Again,
fetus,
dehumanized.
Right. But actually, fetus, if you go back to the original language, Greek, it means tiny person.
Yes.
it means tiny human. I mean, so the term, like the left uses the term fetus as a way to use a euphemism.
Yes.
But fetus means tiny offspring.
Yes.
Actually, it literally means that.
Yeah. No.
So,
I get it. Yeah. So I want to let's shift gears for a second. Again, not off the topic, because the topic is important. This issue, and I'm glad we were able to ask Carrie Severino about Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Roe.
That was a great interview, by the way, and she hit on almost everything that we wanted to ask the expert.
Where do you I mean, actually, this is how I want to ask this question. Can you imagine, right? And I said this, I am profoundly disappointed, not surprised, but profoundly disappointed in the Democratic leadership and the president for not taking the opportunity to say, you know,
don't go to a justice's house,
to condemn the leak and to not go over the justice's house.
Right.
Can you imagine, Jerry, if Donald Trump, right, if this had happened, if some opposite happened, and the Republican conservative protesters were going to protest at Chief Justice's homes, and the president was silent on this, Andrew, they would be calling for impeachment,
and it would be called insurrection.
It would 100%.
This actually, again, January 6th was a mob attack on the Capitol. That is bad.
Yes.
That is evil. I grieved that day. I was embarrassed that day. I called out the president that day on air saying, stop this. It was not an insurrection. However, right, an insurrection is a conspiracy to overthrow the government, to undo the government.
Yes.
Well, what is this but a conspiracy? You have a shadow dark money group organizing, paying money. They have allies in the media, and they're going forth to do what? Essentially shut down the proceedings of the Supreme Court.
Let's be really clear here about this, right? Because, you know, let's walk through. You have the leak, right? And we could get into what the motive is. The motive to stir people up for the 2022 midterm elections? I don't think it is, because the decision is going to come out anyway. No, the motive to leak this was to get people riled up to put pressure on the Supreme Court.
That's a very good point. I want because that's a point.
Yeah, thanks.
We're not hearing much, and that is, this wasn't simply or even at all about the 2022 election, because the decision was going to come out in June anyway.
Yes.
Excellent. As an excellent point.
Thank you.
This really is about undoing, putting pressure. This is a conspiracy to essentially attack the integrity of the Supreme Court
and to force a change. And you know, so when you think about this, so you have the one person or group of people, but let's just say for a moment that it's one person. And I want to interrupt myself and say, it is not helpful for people to, I think it's fine for people to speculate as to who it is. But once you start naming names, right? If you're out there and you are naming names of suspects you think who are working at the high court who would have done this, no, that is unacceptable. Right? Because again, this gets down to the same kind of doxing tactics that we've been talking about over the last few weeks. So you know something, let the marshal of the Supreme Court do her job and investigate this thing.
Yeah.
And then, But so you have the leak that happens, and then you have these outside organizations. The left uses the term dark money. So I'll use the term here, dark money, to then organize people to go and put pressure on these justices to harass them at their homes. And the goal is right, because you want to water down the opinion. We know that Chief Justice Roberts is particularly susceptible to political pressure. And so, to get him to sort of change or to write a concurrence to get,
May I ask a question, Andrew? Because you make another good point here.
Thank you.
And that is, and here's the question. Again, we're going to speculate. Did Chief Justice Roberts invite this type of situation, this leak, because he has been so public about protecting the reputation, the integrity of the court? He invited this, perhaps.
I think that's a fair interpretation. I think that's a real possibility. I mean, right? It gets down to what Justice Ginsburg said. In with regards to Roe, they thought that they were going to be doing this job of sort of settling the issue, and instead it just ossified and further divided. Right? These are the unintended consequences of it. So
listen. I'm sorry, you got it.
So then you have this group out there that is trying to do this, and so whether or not you call it an insurrection, I mean, I think that there's.
Well, I'm only using that term because the left has used that term,
and because there's no other good term for this, which is to say, again, we talk about the undermining of our constitutional precepts, and now we do our job. I think Carrie, because we only had her for a short time, didn't really touch on this. There's the trust that these justices have with their clerks, and the trust that the justices have with each other, and so
which tells me, by the way, because another good you're reiterating another good point. I believe that this was a justice. If I had to speculate, I'm thinking this is a justice with her or his clerks working in tandem.
Well, now, maybe a wink and a nod. I think there's a possibility in that. I would be sorely disappointed to.
Now, again, I'm speculating, right?
Yeah, no, and that is all speculation. I honestly think that it's a clerk who is incredibly woke, who literally thought that they were doing something. Someone who is young and dumb and doesn't know any better, and thought, Sorry, go ahead.
And here's what's interesting too. Because they probably feel justified that this is the moral thing to do.
Yes.
Well, you have journalists, both straight news journalists, but also opinion journalists, who have talked about Donald Trump, January 6th, about the smashing of norms, about the attack on our institutions, who, after this leak, I mean, ranging from Bill Kristol to Vox, which is a very progressive journal, you have journalists and media personalities saying, burn it down.
Yeah.
Again, imagine if Donald Trump on January 6th, with a crowd of tens of thousands, said, go burn it down.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, listen, you've got Anna Gasparian. I hesitate to play. Anna Gasparian from the Young Turks, who had her rant. Senator Elizabeth Warren, who had her rant up.
Can I offer a side note on Ms. Warren, because I saw her, and again, I find her to be appalling. Just her very nature, her presence offends me.
Yes.
Because this is a woman who, for decades, appropriated the Native American culture. I'm being serious for a second. I know a lot have made jokes about this and the warpath and all the rest. I'm not making a joke about this. She purposefully misidentified herself as a person of Native American origin in order to advance her own career.
Yes. And
she took positions and she took professorships away from other women, other Native American, potentially women. She essentially stole and lied and cheated. She's a hustler. Why anyone would take anything she says seriously, it's beyond me. She has proven herself to be someone who cannot be trusted. And so this whole rant, and you saw her with her, I mean, she was so shrill. She should be dismissed out of hand as a hustler. And again, just as a side note, I do, as I noticed for our listeners, Andrew's looking something up.
Yeah,
I do want to say something we haven't touched on, and I know we have to end the show soon. But not only are the Supreme Court justices doxxed, the six so-called conservative justices, 3 in Maryland, 3 in Virginia. Interesting. The law in Virginia forbids protesting at someone's private home.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting if it happens, what law enforcement does. But however, also these dark money groups are also saying to go and disrupt the Catholic Mass on Mother's Day.
Yeah.
They are instructing their followers to go to Catholic churches and to disrupt and to protest and to invade and trespass. So this reminds me very much so of a hero of mine, Dagger John, Archbishop Hughes.
No, agreed wholeheartedly.
Anti-Catholic bigotry runs deep in our nation.
Let me play this, Jerry. This is Anna Gasparian from the Young Turks, Cenk Uygur, his show here. Here's Anna Gasparian.
We don't even have paid family leave. We don't even have affordable childcare in this freaking country. Okay, and the people who fight against those kinds of laws are Republicans.
And yet,
what do you want them to do with their kids when they have to go to work? What do you want them to do? What do you want them to do? I want them to answer that freaking question.
There you go.
You know what? I would love 10,000 times over to answer that question, and that is there are families who should be taking care of their sons and daughters. And what happens is the government robs families of their earnings.
100%.
Governments shut down businesses, and Baltimore City has some of the highest property tax rates in the entire state of Maryland. And you wonder why families can't earn a living, why small businesses can't provide for themselves. It's because government robs them. And your answer, your cheap, empty answer is to be shrill and emotional and non-logical and unreasonable, but also to require and demand more wraparound services. And these wraparound services at public schools or wherever, they don't work. You want to help poor families, poor children. You want to help those who need a hand up. Give them their moms and dads back.
Absolutely.
Give them their moms and dads back. Stop stealing from them for your social programs and your failed public schools and all the rest of it. If you don't mind, though, Andrew, I do want to get back to this.
Please.
There's been a lot, again, in mainstream media saying these Catholic judges. These Catholic judges. Kavanaugh, Catholic.
Amy Coney Barrett.
Catholic. Again, this attack on Catholicism. Again, it's a proxy attack on Christianity more broadly, but there is a darkness in we talk about Jim Crow, we talk about slavery, and we should, but there is a long history of anti-Catholic bigotry in this country. No Irish need apply. I mean, this is true. This is true, and we're seeing it again. And in the 1850s, Catholics had their churches burned. Their businesses destroyed, and John Bishop Hughes went to the.
This is Dagger John. Jerry's talking about here.
You know the story. Tell the story for me. He went to the mayor of New York and he said, "Look, if one Catholic church is touched, I'll unleash
the fury of the city on you." Yes. The fury of the city's Catholics on you. And then they went and they protected themselves.
Yeah, I hope Catholic men defend their churches on Mother's Day.
Yeah.
I hope Catholic men this Sunday, you surround your church and you defend it.
Yeah.
This is what the left wants. And good men and good women have to stand up for the truth. I'm sick of this, Andrew. I'm tired of this. I'm tired of the left waging war.
Not that I'm not trying to end, and I'm not trying to end the show here. I want to be really clear about this. This is why Jerry's sign off always is: plant your feet, find your truth, and stand your ground, stand firm. This is what Jerry, and it has its roots in the lessons of Bishop John Hughes, Dagger John.
Yeah.
Which is why Jerry's dog is named Dagger. Your dog, what? You still have Dagger John, or is Dagger John?
Dagger John passed.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah. So you're on. I'm not trying to end the show. You're on.
Yeah, I'm on Sunday, and again, this is it. I don't understand what else to talk about, but standing up for the truth, whether it's in the context of abortion, whether in the context of a family, we have to. I have such a hard time, Andrew, wrapping my head around those who just don't push back. And I don't mean like the left does. I'm a Christian. I have to love my enemies. I have to do things differently. It's Mother's Day. It's Mother's Day on Sunday. It's very interesting.
Oh my God, time out for a second. And we haven't even gotten into the whole verbiage over women and mothers and the left,
birthing people and all the rest.
Go ahead.
Of it.
Yeah, Mother's Day is Sunday.
It's Mother's Day, and it's interesting. In the New Testament, Peter talks about how a mother should be, but really how a Christian should be, and that is, sometimes we have to preach, or we have to tell people this or that. But it's really through our behavior. It's really about our how we act. And so it's my hope that the people of faith in this country, I know you're busy. I know that you have taxes and tuitions and soccer and baseball and kids and family. I know you're busy. But while we're at the busyness of life, which is a blessing, the left is pushing and stealing and remaking the country that we love. And all you got to do is just simply, you hear a lie, replace the lie with the truth.
Yeah, no, you have to do that. So there's a lot we didn't get to, today. We may need to do a one-off, in the next couple of days, because, we haven't talked to. This. You're right, Jerry. There is no bigger issue than this one. On all levels and all aspects of it, from the leak itself to the substance of the leak, and the reaction from the left to it and what they're going about and doing. But at the same time, we've got this Nina Jankowicz story and the bizarre hearing that the Secretary of Homeland Security had up on the Hill, where basically, essentially, he'd never heard of essentially, he didn't know anything about this woman that he'd hired to run this disinformation governance board.
Again, say that again. The United States government under the Biden administration has created a disinformation governance board.
Yes. Which we
started to talk
about this last week. We started to talk about this last week. We talked a little bit about it, but the point is that the Secretary of Homeland Security was brought before the Congress and was asked questions about this, and basically he had no idea. He had no idea about her social media background, right? And we could talk a little bit about that. No, I'm going to have to do it now. But also, no idea about the very public statement she'd said, repeating, proven disinformation,
right,
on the part of her partisan allies, and it's almost like you'd never actually heard of this person, and so you have that going on. You have what's going on with Ukraine, and I want us, with the New York Times now and others leaking information about U.S. intelligence helping the Ukrainians, and Jerry and I have some really interesting but differing opinions on this, and I'm more inclined to agree with you now than I was earlier. But so there's a lot going on in the world, but we've been going at this for a bit.
Yeah.
And so with that in mind, so Jerry's on Sunday for Mother's Day.
I am, yes.
I wish I could be on the air for Mother's Day weekend, but I am feeling better. Glad everybody else that I know of in my
I was worried about you for a little bit. You were Andrew and I talk all the time because we're brothers. And on Monday, you sounded sick on Monday.
Yeah. So
three or 4 days ago, you sounded
Sunday
sick.
I called Jerry when I got the diagnosis.
You sounded okay on Sunday.
Yeah, I was hurting, but yeah, Monday and Tuesday,
I heard it in your voice.
Yeah, Monday I was really kind of loopy. I mean, that's when the fevers kicked in. Listen, for me, and again, my experience is not to be construed as the same as it is for anybody else. But for me, it was like having a bad cold, like a flu.
Hey, some science there and some medicine. You and I talked about this a little bit this week, and that is, it does look like that COVID is morphing, for lack of a better term, into more of a flu. Now, that being said, the flu's dangerous.
Yeah, it can be.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And just listen, how quickly things changed. You remember talking about horse medicine for treating COVID, and I don't want you to take horse medicine to treat COVID. That's bad. But advocating that people take horse medicine to induce abortion, that's okay now.
And again, that's a true thing.
Yeah.
On Twitter, social media, elsewhere, people saying, well, you can use this horse medicine to induce an abortion. But again, Roe v. Wade, being overturned doesn't make abortion illegal.
Yeah.
These people, they know the truth, but replace it for lies, and that tells us where we are.
Without a doubt. Well, listen, guys, Jerry, what do you want people to do?
Please find the truth, plant your feet, and stand firm. God bless.
Have a great week, everybody. Have fun, stay safe, and happy Mother's Day.